My computer has the thing I'm going to report on sideways, so I just can't actually see. In 2000.
Steve Zeltzer, United Public Workers for Action. And I have a serious concern. There have been two Board of Supervisors audit committees of the systemic racism and practices of the City and County of San Francisco, which has cost the City and County of San Francisco over $70 million because of payments to workers who've been illegally fired, discriminated against, bullied, their lawyers, and also city lawyers and legal counsel. And that these hearings, this Civil Service Commission is supposed to be responsible for making sure that the civil service rules are followed in the City and County of San Francisco. Yet we come to this meeting today, and there's not a word in your agenda on what happened at these hearings. Are you concerned about the situation of African American workers, the systemic discrimination, racist discrimination by City and County of San Francisco workers? Apparently not, because it's not on your agenda. Maybe you think somebody else should take care of it. It's not of the purview of this commission. Well, I differ with that view. I think you have the responsibility as civil service commissioners to be responsible to what's happening if there's systemic violations and discrimination in the City and County of San Francisco. I think the commission has to be questioned about who are they representing? Who are they representing? At the hearings, a large number of city workers said that the Human Resources Director, who's here today, was responsible for illegal discrimination, systemic racism in the City and County of San Francisco. There's been no response, and the managers who were involved in these illegal actions and cost the City and County of San Francisco millions of dollars still have their positions in the City and County of San Francisco. So it's the taxpayers who are paying for the systemic violation of discrimination laws, City and County policies. And I find it astounding that this Human Resource Director is still in her position, considering the nature of the hearing and what came out of the hearing. I think that there's a systemic problem, a failure to take responsibility, a failure of accountability of this commission, of the city, for violations, flagrant violations of law and discrimination. That's why the City and County of San Francisco spent over $70 million for these lawsuits. And apparently they're going to continue, because there continues to be illegal discrimination, harassment, and bullying. And in fact, this Human Resources Director has promoted people who've been involved in illegal discrimination and harassment and bullying. That has to stop, and the people of San Francisco have to demand an end to this, and also the removal of this Human Resources Director for flagrantly violating civil rights laws and proper procedures to protect the City and County workers, and those particularly whistleblowers who are standing up to financial corruption and conflicts of interest in the City and County of San Francisco. So that's what we're talking here. That's what has to be addressed, and it will continue to be addressed, despite the fact that people apparently feel they can close their eyes to it.
Good afternoon, Civil Service Commission. My name is Cheryl Thornton, and today I have come to speak about the malfeasance, the systemic discrimination, and the misrepresentation of workers throughout the City and County of San Francisco workforce. I've been employed by the San Francisco Department of Public Health for the past 28 years. However, my involvement with the San Francisco community at large stems from my childhood. I am a long-term member of SEIU 10-1, and I am a shop steward. I currently serve as a co-delegate for the San Francisco Labor Council and take part in the Social Economic Justice Committee as a representative through a labor council. Many minorities in the same situation as I have faced systemic racism affecting our employment. I've been subjected to a hostile work environment where I was discriminated against on numerous occasions. Even after reporting these incidents to managers, to department heads, and city officials, I have had I have not been protected. I played by the rules. I acquired the necessary credentials for promotional opportunities, sat for numerous civil service examinations, even scoring in the top 5 of the civil service ranking system, Yet, despite to progress in my career, I have not progressed in my career since 1995. I've remained in the same position. Today, I face the same issue: pay equity, due process, safe working conditions, as seen in the April 1968 Memphis, Tennessee sanitation strike, exposing the current situation throughout the workforce of the city and county of San Francisco. Here, 50 years later, we are still encountering a fight for all minority workers. San Francisco workforce data illustrates that the socioeconomic disparities throughout the employment. This data suggests that minorities workers are constantly subjected to systemic racism, where Black workers suffer the most. For all categories of employment within the city and county of San Francisco, Black workers represent 40% of the temporary workers, the categories in the workforce. The representation rate of Black workers in the highest paid job classes is 5% or less, 1/3 of the rate of the representation of the Black overall workers. The median income for a Black worker in the city and county of San Francisco is $60,000. The median income for a white worker is $146,000. I came here today because I sat for an examination, a 2593 program coordinator examination, October 22nd. I was not afforded the opportunity for a reasonable accommodation. I submitted an appeal to the Civil Service Commission on October 22nd, but I was told that in a letter that the Civil Service Commission is waiting for a staff report from DHR. So meanwhile, while I'm waiting, because what I asked for is to take the exam over with my accommodation. Meanwhile, while I'm waiting, they continue to hire off this list. Now, I did sit for the exam. I am reachable on the list, but had I been given the opportunity of having a reasonable accommodation, I believe I could have scored higher. I have been trying for 28 years to get promoted, and I cannot. And I am being discriminated against, and I expect the Civil Service Commission to look into this. And I expect you, Ms. Callahan, to look into this as well. I have contacted you several times, and I have not gotten a response from you. So thank you.
I am here to support my colleague here, Cheryl, who spoke to you. We are working for the union, and we are public services employees. My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. I'm going to spell it out, ELLEN, LEEZHOU. I have been working for our city as a psychiatric social worker for public health for more than 10 years. I am a SEIU 1021 bargaining team member for public employees. As you know, we have more than 16,000 public employees under our union's services. We, many public employees, have been coming here to report to you many days about bribery, harassment, discrimination, extortion, and retaliation. We have been trying every effort to save the city money so the public employees will not sue the city. And you all know, 2017, the city paid out $70 million for settlement for public employees suing the city. And we, many public workers, have been coming in here and asked you to change legislation to protect our public resources. Our public record have been showing that so many people coming in here in many occasions, coming to this commissions to ask for help. So today, I'm here again on behalf of our union, SEIU 2021 and public services workers, to ask you to think about legislation to really protect our city, our public employees. And as you, Micki Callahan, our HR directors, we have been trying so hard to talk to you and many of the people in here about policy that is effective and able to implement. We have talked about that we need reverse evaluation for all public employees to evaluate their supervisors and management staff. Without accountability, nothing will stop all those lawsuits. 2, we ask you, the HR and the Labor Management Division, to have a tracking system. We wanted to know who has been complaining and who are the complainants and how often they've been complaining. So this way to hold the people accountable who continuously to waste our public resources because we have so many people, especially African Americans, and people of color who are women have been harassed, retaliated, extorted, and discriminated against. But nothing from this commission that have new laws and legislation that is protecting us. We are working for the public. I know many of you volunteer, but many of you have experience. You guys are attorneys and commissions.
30 seconds.
And you guys have been putting a lot of resources up in the website. Maybe it's about time for you to change your website information. Gavin Newsom is no longer our mayor. Lyndon Britt is our mayor. But this information is really old. A lot of policy has been outdated. It's time for people to implement what they do and what they get paid for. And thank you. My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. Thank you.
How could that be?
Mr.
I think that the issue of, yeah, this is the subject matter. The Director of Human Resources, her report, this is the subject matter. I mean, we have 2 hearings in San Francisco, extensive hearings of the Board of Supervisors on systemic racism and discrimination in the city and county of San Francisco, where these staff members were here at that hearing, as well as yourself, the Human Resource Director. And what was presented there was that there were accounts, many personal accounts, of systemic racism and discrimination in the city and county of San Francisco. Not only by other managers, but the Human Resource Director. And yet, there's nothing here in the report about what happened. Is there any assessment? Is it true? Is it untrue? I mean, well, it's like it didn't happen. There seems to be a disconnect. Isn't this one city? Isn't the Civil Service Commission responsible for what happens with the public employees in the city and county of San Francisco? Isn't the Human Resources Director's job to be responsible for what's happening as far as the enforcement of the law, discrimination, harassment, bullying? Isn't that her job? Or anyone's job for that matter, who's Human Resources Director. Yet it doesn't appear here. No report, no analysis, no report, no nothing. I hope that the Civil Service Commissioners have read the transcript or watched the transcript of that hearing. But they seem to be oblivious to what happened at those 2 hearings. Why were there 2 hearings? Why did the Board of Supervisors vote to have an audit hearing on the treatment of African American workers in San Francisco? Does anybody have an idea why that happened? Or it's just a big mystery. It's just a big accident. It happened because there are very serious violations of the law. There are very serious violations of discrimination by the city and county of San Francisco, of African American workers, of harassment, of bullying, which we've just heard earlier, where people are being discriminated against because of their race. Because of their race. And yet there's no report by the director of any of this? I mean, I think it's astounding, and again, it shows a lack of responsibility, a lack of accountability, and it shows that this Human Resources Director has to be held accountable. If you can't even report to the Civil Service Commission what happens after 2 important hearings like that, then you have to be held accountable for that. It's apparently, it's of no importance to this commission about those hearings. I find that astounding. How could that be?
I find you out of work. You have no idea what we do or what we don't do.
No, this is a report from the Human Resources Director.
I understand.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
But I
talking about
represented
here.
people for 36 years, and these folks here, all we care about is civil.
Have we heard one word from this commission? Have we heard one word from this commission about these hearings?
Mr. Seltzer,
Yes.
we're done.
Well, I have my 3 minutes.
So I just want to make sure that the speaker is allowed to finish.
Finish.
Yes, you interrupted my 3 minutes.
But you got 15 when I looked at the screen, so you can continue.
Okay, so finally, I mean, this is the responsibility of the Civil Service Commission. This is not somebody else's responsibility. You're responsible for the treatment of all workers in the city and county of San Francisco. and yet it seems like there's no explanation, no report, no assessment, no analysis of what's been going on. I find that unacceptable and has to change. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Linda Simon, and I'm the city's EEO Director. I work for Micki Callahan in the Department of Human Resources. For the record, I would like to stipulate that there were 2 hearings. We presented before the Board of Supervisors. There have been 2 executive directives issued by the mayor. We are working with our labor partners, with our community partners, and, as I said, our labor partners, to figure out what we can do to recruit and train more African Americans wherever we have disparities. And I want to say for the record that there has not been any case where there has been a finding of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation against Micki Callahan. And the number that they are quoting of $70 million in settlements is not correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
Steve Seltzer, United Public Workers for Action. In a effort to have a proper civil service system where people have rights to appeal, having witnesses seems to be a basic necessity if there are violations of civil service rules. So apparently you've improperly proceeded with this de-identification without allowing for transparency, without allowing the person that is making the complaint to have witnesses. I mean, you have lawyers. We have lawyers. The city and county of San Francisco has lawyers. Was this checked out before you passed this? Was this an issue? Did the city attorney's office make a ruling on this that you don't have to have witnesses? Again, we're talking about accountability and transparency. And why am I and the other citizens of San Francisco having to pay money for lawyers when this should have been looked at ahead of time? Was there any determination made by the city attorney's office about this? If it was raised during the hearing on de-identification. If not, I think you have a problem. And rather than spend money on lawyers, if this action is taken improperly, and it seems to me it has been, you're going to have to redo it. So it's done properly to allow this implementation of de-identification. But again, it raises the question, who is paying for this? If there's incompetency and if there are violations of procedure and a lack of following procedures, and it's appealed by a city worker or other people, who is paying for this? It's the public of San Francisco. Again, it's raising the question about the transparency and the credibility of this commission and the Human Resource Director who should know about this. I think, again, all these issues are again raising what is happening with the Civil Service Commission in the City and County of San Francisco. Why are we spending millions of dollars in lawsuits? Why are we having to hire lawyers when this should have been checked out by the City Attorney's Office? This should have been investigated by the Director of Human Resources. Again, it's a lack of transparency, it's a lack of competency, and it's something that should not be tolerated by the people of San Francisco for a commission and for a Human Resources Director, and it has to stop.
Records and also to witness testimony is the commission's ability to do so in an investigation. And we have addressed that response. So what's before you today is the goals and objectives for this commission.
The City and County of San Francisco is spending tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on outsourced work that could be done by city employees. And frankly, what the Human Resource Department is saying is that they have to compete with positions in the city. That's one of the things she said, and there's a pension crisis. Well, I would say one of the issues of pension is the issue of high-paid executives of the City and County of San Francisco that are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, while line workers are not getting hired as they should be. There's a shortage of staff in frontline positions in General Hospital and other city facilities. A large amount of money now is going to consultants and is going to outsourcing the work in the City and County of San Francisco, including the use of the EPIC program and the LEAN program, which is to speed up workers and get rid of them, basically, including senior employees in the City and County of San Francisco. And I think the whole direction of the Department of Human Resources has to be redirected. Their solution is, it seems, more consultants, more temporary exempt employees, that is the solution to the crisis we have. I would say increase civil service testing, increase staffing of frontline workers, and we'll solve a lot of these problems. A lot of this outsourced work that they're requesting, tens of millions of dollars, can be done by city employees. Why do they have to go to consultants? There's no justification. That's not even asked by this commission, if this work can be done by city employees. It's not even a question at this commission. Frankly, I have a problem with that, and the public in San Francisco should have a problem with that. Engineering work and other kinds of work can be done by city employees. That doesn't have to be outsourced. I know that that's the big deal now, outsourcing and privatization. That's what's being pushed by the city and county management and other cities in San Francisco. That is a real problem for the people of San Francisco. Furthermore, you have these special districts, business districts, in which city workers private workers are doing city work through outsourcing and privatization. I think that has to be challenged. These business districts are a way of outsourcing the work of city workers, and these workers are not even in unions and are not even paid living wages in many cases. That has to end. When you have the homeless situation in San Francisco and the people in the streets, these people should be trained and should be able to get city jobs. This is a rich city. We're going to be getting hundreds of millions of dollars in new funding from new development. That money should go to city workers.
What Ms. Ng mentioned about outreach and retention and people not qualifying for meeting minimum qualifications. I'm here to tell you again that I've worked for the Department of Public Health for 28 years. I have scored in the top 5 of civil service examinations. I have not had one interview in 28 years. I am currently on a list that has de-identification. There have been 3 positions already interviewed in my department, in the health department, working in the clinics. I'm reachable on the list, not received the interview. So, as far as people meeting minimum qualifications, as far as going to the neighborhood saying people, we can't make special conditions, it's not special conditions, it's discrimination that we're facing. I mean, look at the board up there. Look what it represents. I mean, it doesn't look like people of color. I mean, so we're just not being represented, especially African Americans. We're being discriminated. It's intentionally, this is intentional what's being done. The population has gone, I think, from, 18% down to less than 3.9%. That's intentional. It's shameful. We're losing diversity in this city. Black people are not inferior. We want to work. I want to be promoted. I'm an advocate for the community. I was removed from my job because they said duplicity of duties. I qualified for that examination for the position that they said that my duties were duplicitous. I have not been promoted. I have not been interviewed. I'm an example of what happens to black workers in the city and county of San Francisco. We are stuck in the same position forever until we just give up and leave. It's called discrimination. It's not called outreach. It's not called not meeting minimum qualifications. It's called discrimination, and you guys really need to look into it.
Issue of EPIC, you've got $10 million for the EPIC program in this policy, this action item you're about to vote on. Our view is that this EPIC program is discriminatory and racist. It's targeting African American Latino workers. The EPIC program is an unfair program. As a matter of fact, it's removing people from classifications, changing classifications, and actually discriminating people.
I want to ask City Attorney, are you asking to separate this item from the regular agenda we're voting on?
No, I'm just talking about all the items.
So, as I understand it, the public comment that's being offered is on personal services contract number 41701 involving the IFPTE HR program.
1890, yeah.
And I think as long as that's the case, then that's an item on the agenda, and there's a right to public comment.
I just wanted to see if we were before we go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think that this issue of the EPIC program has to be examined seriously, and I don't think the city and county of San Francisco should be spending tens of millions and what could be hundreds of millions of dollars, $300 million on this contract. Again, if we have a program, a software program for making the city function properly or better, why can't city workers do it? Why can't software engineers do it? There are many around in San Francisco. Why do we have to go to outside consultants? But the EPIC program actually has been used by city agencies and public agencies to privatize and downsize, and actually targeting workers who do provide services. In fact, there have been actions in Highland Hospital and other hospitals against this EPIC program. Now, I know that there's a lot of money invested in this by the city and county of San Francisco and other public agencies, but it has to be challenged if it's having a deleterious effect on a segment of the city workforce, which this program is. And I think that there should be an investigation of the effect of EPIC for employees in the city and county of San Francisco. There should be statistics. How many managers or executives have been removed as a result of the institution of the EPIC program? Do you have a list on that? It's mainly the frontline workers who are being targeted by these programs. And they've been instituted actually by corporations that make money from downsizing. That's what's driving, in fact, that's what's driving the electronification, to get rid of workers and to have more electronification. That's really what's going on in this country, and also helping to subsidize companies that are involved in that business. So I think that has to be challenged, it has to be examined, and I think the people of San Francisco should not be paying hundreds of millions of dollars to EPIC and other programs like this.
My name is Cheryl Thornton, and I'm a member of SEIU 10-1, and I want to comment on EPIC. So we've been, in SEIU, we've been meeting with the implementation team for EPIC, and we have been told that the 1400 series, one of the classifications that I'm in, is going to be basically obsolete. We're going to be displaced, and some of us are going to be put on temporary, going from permanent workers to temporary exempt workers. I think this should be looked into because, again, I've applied for higher classifications. I have a college degree. I have the necessary credentials. I cannot be promoted, but yet I'm in a classification that is going to be cut because of the EPIC system. So I hope you guys look into this further.
Inability or an unwillingness to keep African American workers in positions, particularly in better paid positions. For example, nurses in the city and county of San Francisco, who are serving African American and Latino communities, poor communities. Apparently the city is not allowing nurses, African American nurses, to be in these positions, to serve the community. And there's a series of discriminations, discriminatory actions by the Human Resources Director and Department, which is retaliated against nurses. So the question is why, when you're serving a population of African American and Latinos, you don't have people in the city who are doing those jobs? Why is that? And this was testified at the hearing from African American workers about the fact that they were qualified for the position, in many cases overqualified for the position. They were retaliated, discriminated, and not able to keep their positions or apply for management positions. This is going on at General Hospital. It's going on at other city departments, in the Department of Public Health particularly. So when we look at the situation of systemic discrimination and racism, we have to look at where in the departments that this is taking place and what classifications is taking place. Furthermore, some would argue, well, we're doing better than private industry. I would agree with that. And the reason is private industry is not under the requirements of civil service. It's much more easier to discriminate against workers because of their color, because of their orientation, sexual orientation, whatever. That is a fact. That is a fact. So I think that far from saying that we should pat ourselves on the back, the city and county of San Francisco should pat itself on the back, the fact is there isn't an enforcement of private industry similar to the enforcement that takes place for civil service commissions. And that's actually why there's an incentive for people to get rid of public service, civil service, to outsource the jobs, which you have been voting to do. You've been voting to outsource city jobs to EPIC and other programs where they are not required really to have the same kind of transparency public workers have and the same equal rights. So that's a systemic problem, and frankly, the serious problems of discrimination in the city and county of San Francisco, in particular classifications of those workers serving communities, African American communities and Latino communities, is where we have to look at and is not being addressed really by this report.
Any other public comment?
Hi, Cheryl Thornton, member of SEIU 10-1. Recently, I'm part of the Erase Racism Committee for SEIU, and recently we received data from the Board of Supervisors. And I want to talk about, even though that this report, that the city has a diverse workforce, African Americans were in the top 5 job categories were day laborer, mini bus driver, and the other 3 were temporary exempt positions, 9910, recreation leader, and 9924. There's a huge income disparity. African Americans had the largest income disparity. The average income for median income for an African American worker was $60,000. It went on up to Latino Hispanic, $106,000. Asian American, Pacific Islander was $111,000, and Filipino American was $129,000. They attribute that to there were so many nurses that had been recruited from the, I guess, Filipino community that was one of the top. That's why their income was $129,000, and then white workers were $146,000. So even though we're diverse, we're in the lowest paid categories in the city and county of San Francisco. This is fueling gentrification. You cannot live here if you cannot afford to stay here. And with us being in the lowest income brackets and temporary work, this is a problem. So to pat yourself on the back and say that we have a diverse workforce is misleading. We are in the lowest categories and we have the largest income disparity. And it's not because we don't have college degrees, it's not because we're not qualified, it's because we're being discriminated against in this city. And so, again, I hope you look into that. Thank you.
For action. The issue of what is going on at MTA with the transit drivers is an important issue for the public and the transit users in San Francisco. Because the city and county of San Francisco actually had high-paid transit workers that did not have to go for many years to get their pay. Under so-called reforms under Sean Ellsberg, former supervisor, and former Mayor Gavin Newsom, there was an attack on transit workers in San Francisco. They were accused of being overpaid. And many of these transit workers were African American. Is that a surprise? They were accused of being overpaid, and they changed the rules in San Francisco. And they said that they would make it better. Now, Sean Ellsberg is the chief of staff for our present mayor. So what has happened with the change of rules is now it's hard to retain drivers. There's a high turnover, and young drivers who come in cannot keep their jobs. They look for other jobs. It's over 3 years to go to the higher pay level. So drivers can't make it in San Francisco, bus drivers, and it is a strenuous, very difficult condition being a bus driver. So if we're going to really change the retention rate for transit workers in San Francisco and bus drivers, we're going to have to lower the amount of time it takes to become at the higher, paid at the higher scale. That's one of the things that we will do, and we will be able to retain the drivers. The issue is the rule of 3, which is being eliminated. The language is being eliminated, the rule of 3. The rule of 3 has been used so that to strengthen civil service. And what is happening now is that that's under attack, and basically it allows more nepotism and cronyism in the retention of employees and also getting more applications. That is why there's been an attack on the rule of 3. So I think we have to address this issue for the future of transit in San Francisco because, as a matter of fact, having more public transit, having more bus drivers and more public transit is critical. And I think that that is not being addressed by simply asking for more recruitment.
IT storage locations, one's like centrally stored by division, and then individuals have their own individual working files. So it's files for the individual related to their job. So it's not like personal, from home type files, but kind of the type of files one would have performing your job duties. It's just in a storing location that's accessible only to the employee themselves.
Why is it limited only to that employee?
Well, it's not.
Okay, so it's part of city property, so it's not.
Yeah, it's
so I'm a little bit confused about this concept of personal work file.
So it's a city, like essentially a city storage location, city hard drive.
Are you
on
talking
city.
about pending files?
They could be pending files, they could be files that she's working on. Like I said, she deleted performance evaluations of people employees she was supervising. She deleted this spreadsheet tracking the reassignment of injured employees. So it's just the idea of, there's two locations. There's a shared location where the entire workers' compensation division has access to it, and also for individual employees, they have an individual location accessible only to that employee. It's basically a drive with a different name. You have your L drive and your S drive.
So you have no personal ownership of it?
Correct.
It's basically the city's files. For the performance reviews, are you talking about supervisory notes and files regarding performance? Because performance reviews are supposed to be filed in the personnel file.
These are working copies of performance reviews that haven't been filed yet, that haven't been submitted as a final draft.
So it's performance records up until the time she left?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, comments? Anything else? Okay, for now, we'll thank you for that. We may call you back up. Start to have Ms. Angelina, please.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Elizabeth Angelini, former 8165 Workers' Compensation Supervisor with the Department of Human Resources. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. For 9 years, I proudly served as a civil servant for the City and County of San Francisco. For 9 years, there was not a single blemish throughout the entire duration of my service. In front of you are documents from the Department of Human Resources recommending my future employment restriction based on a single week of my work history. The Division of Workers' Compensation presents an argument that appears compelling but remains incomplete. The allegations that I intended to harm the City and County of San Francisco with my actions are baseless. All of the information which is being presented as deleted or destroyed was in fact provided to a colleague via email because I felt threatened by my manager, Julian Robinson. A copy was made as a means to protect myself in case something such as a future employment restriction was to be imposed or other attempts to discredit me were made. As I mentioned before, all of the information was given to a colleague whom still has the records both electronically and physically at 1 South Van Ness. Therefore, the records were never destroyed. And I never put the MPN in jeopardy as they're trying to intend. Julian was apprised that the information still existed. However, he proceeded to expend IT resources in recovering these documents, despite the fact that Julian already had knowledge from my former colleague of the information being copied through a conversation that happened with that colleague. He moved forward with this intent to enforce a future employment restriction upon me. Thus, I asked the Commission for a neutral reference with no employment restriction. There is a turn of phrase that people do not quit their jobs, but instead they quit their managers. I am living proof that this is true. With my departure, I believe that a healthy compromise was already struck. My hope is that both parties, myself and the Division of Workers' Compensation, may amicably settle their differences by parting ways with no punitive measures undertaken by the Department of Human Resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Southson.
The department has said that you indicated that you would be available for transition, and then
kind of a difficult history. I don't know that I necessarily want to get into it at this late time now. It was a hard last 2 years that I worked there. There was a change of management under Julian Robinson, and the last thing, I think, as I was on my way out and I produced my resignation, I didn't want to have to face him. Truth be told, it was a terrible time in my life. And so leaving a job again that I truly loved was really hard for me. I apologize for getting emotional. It really was a place that I thought I was gonna retire. And it no longer became a tenable situation for me. And so, in a long-winded answer, I did not want to wait around for him. He was actually on vacation, and it was planned that I was not going to come back. I left a few of my personal items, and in my head I waffled back and forth with actually coming back, but I could not bring myself to do it. I could not come back in for another day.
Commissioner Fidetti.
Did you read them? Okay, so you said that he was on vacation.
He was, yes.
Okay, so instead of giving your information to the next level supervisor, you gave it to a colleague, another supervising?
I did, yes.
And who did you report that to? Did you report that to the department head?
No, I did not.
And why not?
Again, it's complicated. I had already fought with trying to report what was happening to me while I was there for the last 2 years, and it fell on deaf ears. So I did not feel that the management supported me anywhere above the supervisory level. My colleague that received those files was one of the few people that I trusted, and I knew that it was going to go to a good place where it wasn't going to get misused, and it was going to be safe. Again, I would never put my coworkers in jeopardy of not being able to get a hold of a medical assistant. The person that I took the program over for, Linda Bernstein, still worked there. So if they really were in a pinch, she could have easily stepped in and assisted. Every single MPN update was always emailed to Julian. So if he wanted to filter his email, anything that was provided to them that I produced, except in the last 2 weeks, which again was all given to that colleague, that was all emailed to Julian. He actually structured it that way, that I had.
Except what you gave to your colleague.
Except what I gave to my colleague, and that was only in the last 2 weeks, and that spreadsheet that they're referring to is also part of all of that.
So the next question is, why didn't you send it up to the next level up?
Again,
Why
because I
did you
didn't
report-
trust, I'm sorry to interrupt you, go ahead.
Why that the department head is responsible for the work?
I understand that, again, there's a trust issue, which again, I don't want to go into
No, what I'm
deeper
saying,
than that.
this is a basic, you have other issues. This is a basic thing you tell the department head, these are where the files are, from the period of time here to there.
I wish it was less complicated than that, but it's not.
And then one final question, and that is why you're saying the last 2 years were terrible. What was the problem?
Management was a problem, management above me. And I felt, again, like every source I turned to was not being helpful. It essentially was the reason why I left the city and I sought employment elsewhere for pretty much 2 years until I could find a way out. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I feel for the many people who continue to contact me and tell me how terrible their work situation is, how unbelievably hard it is to come into work every day and work where they work. And all I can do is comfort them and tell them, I found a way out, you can too. It did not break me. And I think that was the parting words that continued to churn in my head is that I think if at anything, I walked away from it and I'm a happier person, I'm a better person. And yes, it was miserable, but I feel like I'm stronger from it.
Did you report the issues to the department head?
I did. The relationship was, I believe, very clear when he took over. I indicated it to my department head that it was going to be a difficult relationship, and what I was told was, we have to make it work.
I'm just very concerned that the information was not submitted to the department head. That's fine.
Commissioner Sells.
Just a couple questions. One is, you say you're in a better space now. Looking back on it, how do you wish you had handled it?
If I see it in front of everybody else's eyes, it probably wasn't the best way to handle it. I wish I would have done what you had said, Ms. Ruddy, and Fidetti, excuse me, and probably given it to somebody else. The situation that I was in just felt like I was being squeezed, and it was cathartic to be, pretty frank. It just felt really good to walk away at that point. And I was hoping with really no ramifications except for this restriction. I agree. It wasn't the best way to leave. Obviously, I'm in front of you right now because it wasn't the best way to leave. Again, life presented few choices when I was leaving.
If the commission were to limit the restriction to the Department of Human Resources, would you find that a good outcome?
Provide me the ability to still work at the city and county without my name being smeared. I would think that would be an excellent compromise, yes.
Commissioner Chan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Angelini, a topic that we've touched on matters that are personally upsetting to you, and so I hope you'll give me a little leeway if I'm required generally, because what I'm trying to get at is that you've offered a situation or described the situation in general terms as being complicated as a way of explaining or mitigating the manner in which you had separated from your workplace. Is it fair to say that you had lost a degree of competence in the chain of command, for lack of a better word, in your department that had induced you to be reluctant in passing these files along to the next higher level of supervision?
Much more eloquently said than I was capable of saying it, yes.
Now, Commissioner Fidetti, my colleague, has indicated that you potentially had further recourse by going even higher up the chain without creating what the department obviously perceived was a major IT event here. And I was wondering if you could provide further explanation to me as to why you didn't consider
why I didn't consider giving it to department head.
The next higher up, if you didn't have confidence in your immediate superior.
I don't want to throw the word around lightly, but a lot of it, even on my way out, I think there were a lot of people who were associated me, who supported me. I didn't want to make their life more difficult as well if I were going to be on my way out. I didn't want any kind of retaliatory action against anybody that was close to me. I felt that in many ways that the way I had been treated again in the last 2 years of my tenure was sort of like that. Nothing, again, I didn't want to get into this part of it.
That I understand. Now, the problems to which you alluded, is there any documentation that you would have that you would call attention to whatever this problem was that was vexing you during your final days here with in your position?
So much of it is verbal that's done and what I kept on hearing is over and over again to who I went to for counsel is that the threshold for retaliatory actions was very high and I did not belong to a protected class. And so after hearing that many times over and over and over again, there wasn't any finding that was, again, violated a protected class. So I kind of shut the door to that. I didn't want to have to keep on reopening that wound.
Now, the person or party to whom you sought counsel, were they, was this with another department tasked with hearing or providing counseling services to you, or is
Yes.
this more of an informal
Yes.
counsel, or was this a coworker, or?
No, it was a complaint filed on my behalf. I never filed it myself.
All right, but you had the opportunity to speak with whoever took in the complaint
Yes,
and presumably received advice or evaluation of your situation. Is that
I
correct?
did.
And when did that occur? And at what point in time?
October of 2017.
Thank you. President, I don't have any further questions.
Commissioner Ferretti.
I just want to review, you're familiar with the city's policies on harassment and the ability to report. You're also familiar with the whistleblower program, and you're also familiar with EAP, the Employee Assistance Program?
Yes.
So did you seek those options?
I did everything but the whistleblower program.
And employee assistance also?
I did not go to employee assistance.
So, you also said you were concerned that your name was going to be smeared if you gave the information to the department head. And I'm going to be telling you this right now. You know, I would like to be able to do something other than the recommendation. However, I will be very honest, you're making it very difficult. Because you had an option to bring it to the department head. It appears to me that you left in retaliation. The person was on vacation. You could have just left the information there, and I'm not sure why. I can't see the reason. Even if it wasn't the department head here, there's also the Director of Human Resources. So I'm just not sure. As I say, I'm trying to find another way.
Right.
But you're not giving me a lot of opportunity in my mind.
I did not feel comfortable giving that information to you.
Information about performance reviews, and information about the patients, and information about the individuals that were in workers' comp to the Director of Workers' Comp?
Yes.
Commissioner Chan.
Yes, on the matter, I don't mean this to be a redirect, but it's apparent from your presentation that you were concerned the information if you provided it to your immediate superior?
Yes.
And specifically, what are those concerns?
We had always had a tumultuous relationship. I was worried that my reputation was going to be.
Aside from the reputational matter, were you concerned about what would happen to the actual data that you passed along, or you've already stated that you're concerned about being retaliated against, but you seem to imply that something would happen with this information if you had passed it along to your superior.
The person who was passed the information had expressed interest in taking over the position that I was in. When I gave them that information, there was already a lot of murmurs about who was going to be taking it over when I left. It's currently the person that has the position.
I understand that, but was your reluctance to commit to an orderly transfer of this data, was this out of concern for the integrity of the data, or was this, you already stated you were concerned about the person, but I'm trying to understand why this data could not be transferred up your supervisory chain. Were you concerned about the data or what would happen to it?
Yes, it wouldn't be the first time that I was concerned with data that
What were you concerned would happen to the data if you had passed it up in the normal course of the transition?
In past years, there had been questions among myself and colleagues about some of the data that had been reported by that particular person, my manager, that were what everybody believed, again, my colleagues, my fellow supervisors, believed was not, there wasn't integrity behind the data.
Your concerns that it would have been altered or destroyed in some way that would reflect negatively on you?
Yes.
Let me ask you another thing. But if he was on vacation, so why couldn't you have given it to Dr. Sugarman?
Like I said, I did not feel comfortable doing that.
To the department head?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
I wonder if we can hear from the department head.
Okay.
I don't know.
Thank you. We may call you back up. Thank you.
My question is, having heard what we heard about the reflections of the appellant, do you have any further thoughts on what the appropriate restriction is, whether a lesser restriction would serve the department's needs, and also do you have any comments on what you heard from the appellant?
Adam Romaslawski, Department of Human Resources. Given what Ms. Angelini has said, I would ask that you take that under in consideration as well. The idea that she was concerned with the integrity of the data, so she hid it, doesn't track as exercising the type of duties we'd expect of a city employee, of a supervisor, employee as a supervisor. In a way, it's almost worse than hiding it, that it was some sort of unspecified insurance policy at the beginning, but at the end, and now she's worried that it's going to be altered. That I think if that's the justification for why she made the decision that she did, I think that supports a citywide ban rather than a department-specific ban. We tried not to guess as to what her motivation was for the intentional actions. Now we know. Now we know what the basis was. So, yeah, as much as I'd like to say that, oh, it all makes sense now, it makes less sense now. There was still intentional action. She acted intentionally. She, she acted intentionally. So I think, given what I've heard, yeah, it supports a citywide ban. Dr. Sugarman?
Did you work with her, or are you just representing the department in this proceeding?
I'm representing the department and work directly with her.
So, what I'm wondering is from Ms. Sugarman, what we've heard from the appellant is that there was a very brief period of time, about a week or so, where she was, emotional and maybe did some actions she regrets, but that is against her entire work history. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that and what the appropriate remedy is.
Thank you. And my name is Peggy Sugarman. I'm the Workers' Comp Director for the City and County of San Francisco. Actually, I'm... Okay, thank you. Is that better? Peggy Sugarman, Workers' Comp Director for the City and County of San Francisco. I actually am a little bit baffled by the testimony here today. Let me just give you, and your question specifically is about the emotional nature when...
My question is whether you agree that basically the performance was good until the very end when this happened.
Yes, I do agree. When Ms. Angelini came into my office and she sat down, I welcomed her into my office. She handed me a resignation. We had a very pleasant chat. I'm unaware of any emotional nature that accompanied that resignation. We agreed that we would meet the following Monday to have a transition. I wished her well, and that was really the extent of the conversation. One of the comments I would like to make is about the documents themselves, because I'm having trouble understanding her concern over the transfer of those documents. What we're talking about are individually scanned copies of our individually signed memorandums of understandings with our doctors who treat our injured workers here in the city. That these are documents that they have to sign in order to be members of our medical provider network. We're talking about other drafts and copies of documents that we need to file with the state in order to stay in compliance. Whenever you have a change of medical access assistant or medical contact, the regulations from the State of California Division of Workers' Compensation require that we make those changes publicly, put them in printed documents, and refile them as a plan modification with the state before that change occurs. And so, again, all of this could have been very easily handled since we thought she was coming back to where we could go through all of this stuff. And in fact, she never did come back. And it was only following that when we were able to unlock her office and find that she had already cleared out her office, basically telling us that the action signaled to me that she never had any intention of coming back to make that transition. Had I known that, I would have worked to make the transition that following day so that we could have avoided all of this. Instead, we were put behind an 8-ball, having to recover the information, not only off of her personal, the laptop that had been assigned to her from the city, but the shared drive where all these documents were to remain public. So yes, we were able to recover everything. Thank goodness we have faith in our IT staff at the Department of Human Resources. It did put our medical provider network in jeopardy because this is what provides necessary treatment to all of the injured workers in the city, including the municipal transit agency. She was responsible for all of this. So again, I'm having trouble trying to square how these documents could ever have been confused with any worry about the integrity of those documents.
Just one last question. Prior to your meeting about the resignation, did Ms. Angelini come to you with any work problems?
No, she did not.
every workday, we would expect all of the documents to be retained, to be on the shared drive. Again, she went into the shared drive as well and eliminated those documents from the shared drive.
And are those required weekly, every other day, or in loading documents from their previous work?
Actually, I don't know how often.
I could speak to that one, certainly. Adam Romaslawski, Department of Human Resources. I think the expectation is for work files that they're to remain on either the shared drive or the personal department drive. So either one of those, they're not to be saved on the computer itself, but on one of the two shared drives. And certainly, the working copy shouldn't be retained on like a thumb drive or at home or something like that. So there is an expectation that the files be maintained on these departmental drives.
But never at home, correct?
Excuse me?
Never at home? That's okay.
No, we want copies maintained at a location where we have security and have access to it. So, thank you.
And I know this is going to sound repetitive, but I just want to confirm that I heard correctly. She deleted the shared drive. Is she saying she didn't, or she's nodding her head no?
Well, when we looked in the shared drive, there were no documents there, so.
Okay, so Ms. Angelini, you're saying you didn't?
I did not. No.
Well, would you please come up with?
Please repeat the way. Thank you. Say your name correctly, please.
Elizabeth Angelini, I did not delete anything in the shared drive. It was my personal files. And again, everything that was any kind of updates, they were all provided to Julian by email. The one exception to that was a spreadsheet that they were referring to, and that was provided to my colleague. And any of the other, like I said, updates.
When you went with the resignation, you didn't give her your supervisor any opportunity to have the information that you gave to your colleague?
No, I did not. No. I also just wanted to say that at my resignation, I did not let Peggy know about these problems, but definitely at the beginning of the 2 years that I'm referring to, she was well aware that there were issues between myself and Julian Robinson.
Did you met with her about it?
I did meet with her, yes.
Colleagues?
Well, I mean, I feel that Ms. Angelini has made a very big mistake. However, I am very concerned that somebody with a long work history that appears to have been good be precluded from all city employment. So my inclination would be to limit the restriction to the Department of Human Resources.
I would actually like to see some experience outside, because I am really concerned about the danger. I mean, that was, quite frankly, because I was struggling while I was reading this. I thought to myself, there's got to be something else we could do other than restrict it completely. But I am really concerned about the motivation in which she did take this action. And although I doubted it as I was reading it, I now am convinced that it was retaliation on her part. I would rather see that she has some history outside the city and county before she comes back. And if she's going to be coming back to the Department of Human Resources after 5 years, she could ask that restriction be removed. I really think that she needs to, that this was a very serious action. And I do believe that it was retaliatory. She had many opportunities to do other things. And I am sorry, but I do believe that you decided that you had had enough and you were going to get even. It came to me to that. That's where I'm sorry that it was a big mistake in judgment. It may have been. I do believe that you need to demonstrate, my feeling, some experience outside before you come back to the city and county, or even consider to come back to the city and county. And I don't necessarily mean that I would restrict her from the Department of Public Health at all, but she does have to have outside.
Human Resources.
Human Resources.
Are you going to put a speak into the mic?
I would say I would say that a minimum of 5 years outside the city and county of San Francisco satisfactory service. I'm not necessarily going to restrict. I
maintain the restriction from employment at the Department of Human Resources, but to permit her to return to the city in other departments after 2 years of satisfactory employment elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm inclined to have a, if I may, Mr. President, I think a modulated approach that proportionate to the seriousness of the testimony that we've seen, but also the facts proffered in mitigation of that. And I'm inclined to support what I understand would be a 2-year restriction on all citywide employment.
And canceling any eligibility that she currently has for any other position.
Right, but with the opportunity, and I would support the motion based on the assumption that she would have the opportunity thereafter of showing a clean work history after 2 years to appeal the citywide restriction, but that the 5-year there would be a 5-year period before she could take another run at DHR. So it'd be a 2 and a 5.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, that ends up.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
I
just want to make sure I understood your motion.
I would like to have somebody clarify, but I thought the proposed restriction was permanent for a long time.
No.
Just for 5 years?
No, so after 5 years, she can request to have that removed. It does have to go back to the commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think a citywide ban would probably be a bit more severe. But I think we still nonetheless need to send the message that this is not the way to go out. Absent a proffer of more specific facts and mitigation, which we did not hear in this proceeding. And obviously it's not our job to be litigating on behalf of the appellant or the department. But I think this would be a reasoned approach, particularly in view of the fact that there appear to be no priors on the record for this employee, and I think that counts for something. If I would second Commissioner Gonzalez's motion.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Brown, do you have that?
Yes.
So we all understand what we're voting on? Okay.
Is there public comment before we decide?
Pardon me?
Comment
We're going to have public comment.
Hold on. Would you like to repeat that? I have a message coming to me from down below.
2 years, cancel all current exam and eligibility status. 2 years outside service, satisfactory outside service outside the city, county of San Francisco, and not back to the DHR. Okay.
That's as we understand it, correct? Yes. And it's been moved and seconded. Is that what you're requesting? Did you hear that?
Public comment.
Pardon me? Yeah, public comment now.
Comment before you decide? or
Yes.
after? Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Okay, public comment.
Yes. My name is Kazumi Tori, San Francisco resident, and I don't know any detail of Miss Angelini's case other than what I heard today. But have you heard what kind of her supervisor's treatment toward workers, the maid workers, so miserable to work in the city's job? Is there any mechanism in your side that any evaluation of the supervisors or any position who manage the workers to evaluate by workers themselves? There has to be some kind of mechanism that workers, employees, rank and file people should be able to express or evaluate the supervisors. So not only the top people, judge, oh, you are doing fine, like that, but workers are the one have to suffer every day to work under those management. And I heard not only her case, but the previous meeting with supervisors and black workers, many of the minority workers came and expressed their treatment, mistreatment by supervisors, their discrimination, harassment by supervisors, they are the one making workers so miserable and forced to quit or forced to, change the job or forced to fight to get their job back. And there seems to be no mechanism that those rank and file workers can evaluate their supervisors. Is there any system for that? Otherwise, workers just take it whatever the management do, and being mistreated and being discriminated, harassed, and some people might go for try to speak up on that, but then the retaliation comes, and eventually they're forced to quit the job. So it seemed to be that her case, she was so afraid to even go to the supervisors to bring the case. And they tried to, survive after, so many years putting her life on a city job. Now try to survive. And many workers are like in the same conditions. So there should be some kind of mechanism that the rank and file or regular workers working under the supervisors have to be able to evaluate, like a city college, a state, which was college I went to. Students are able to evaluate teachers. There's no mechanism in here.
Hi, so I was retaliated against. I went to my supervisors. I went to the ethics commission, the controller's office. My case currently has been sitting in the ethics commission for 9 months, and it has not been investigated. I was harmed by being in an unsafe work environment. So I actually understand what Mrs. Angelini was feeling at the time. She was contemplating whether to go to disclose and be slandered, or not to disclose and try to get away and not be harmed further. In my case, I chose to disclose, and I was slandered. And I did receive no due process. And my reputation has been harmed in the community. So I think that, like Ms. Cosme said, there needs to be a mechanism available for rank and file workers to have a way to go and report illegal activity and discrimination without being harmed, because then they may never get another job again anywhere. And so I just want you to consider maybe that was what was going on with Mrs. Angelini.
Steve Zeltzer, United Public Workers for Action. So here we have the Department of Human Resources, I think, furthering the torment of this worker. That's what you're doing. Ms. Angelini was obviously being tormented on her job. She was afraid to make a complaint to all the agencies. Why? Why was she afraid to make a complaint? Can anyone figure that out in this commission? Because she was afraid of further retaliation by the Department of Human Resources and the director. That's why she was afraid to make a complaint. So what kind of work atmosphere do we have at the Department of Human Resources? Where the workers are afraid to say that they're being tormented, or they're being harassed, or they consider the material, the documents, threatened? This is a serious issue. Yes, I agree with them. It is a serious issue when the integrity of the documents are threatened. But if no one can talk about it, if people are afraid to talk about it, how do you address it? If workers are afraid to speak up about what they see as serious problems, how do you address it? And I think the action that you take today to ban her from any city job for 3 years and 5 years for every department is a further action to really retaliate against her. She was a good city worker. She was conscientious. She was never written up. For how many years? 9 years? And for 2 years she was tormented by a supervisor and afraid to come forward because of retaliation, which this department is allowing on even its own workers in the Department of Human Resources. So I think you should reject this proposal and allow her to apply for other city jobs. I think that would be a statement to the managers of the Department of Human Resources that you have to treat your workers with respect. And that if you retaliate against them, you're going to be held accountable. And that's what we're talking about, holding the managers accountable. That's what we're talking about here. Not the workers, the managers. And that is what the people of San Francisco should expect, that the managers for the city and county of San Francisco be held accountable for what they do, when they harass, when they bully, when they torment workers. That's what we're talking about. If you do that, then you won't have the kind of problems that you're having here, which are harming people psychologically, which cause many workers to go on disability. There's a great amount of disability costs for workers who've been harassed, tormented, and hounded from their jobs. Who is responsible for that? This is the department responsible, workers' compensation. They're the department that's supposed to handle this. Have they examined why so many workers have to go off on disability in the city and county of San Francisco? That's costing us, the taxpayer, money. Have they examined that? Why is that happening? Why are workers being harassed and bullied that they're forced to go on disability? Those are the issues that have to be addressed.
Sitting here, and including but not limited to today, much of which are actually within the purview of the other branches of city government, whether they be changes in policy or legislative solutions or to seek remedies that we lack the power under our part of the charter to enact sui sponte. While we do sit in a quasi-adjudicative role, we are hardly a court capable of taking judicial notice of anything. And we can only make reasonable inferences based on the facts and the administrative records placed before us. Generalized allegations and conclusory facts are still conclusory. So absent greater level of specificity, particularly facts that may go to mitigation or by way of explanation of particular sets of behavior, that for any number of reasons is not before us on this record. However, I think the disciplinary remedy is suggested by Commissioner Salveson is proportional, notwithstanding his misstatement of what it is on the public record, but I believe the 2 years would be appropriate, particularly with some objective evidence of good performance and another employment setting provides this appellant with the opportunity to come back to lift what I understand would be the city-wide restriction. And then, of course, there's still the opportunity to even reinstate status at the conclusion of 5 years. So, for that reason, I'm prepared to vote.
Okay. So, the question has been called for. The public has spoken, and now I'll ask for a vote. So, all those in favor of Commissioner Salveson's motion, thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.